Hi, this is my review of Eldritch Tales, Lovecraftian white box role-playing. This is an old-school Renaissance type of role-playing game that allows you to have adventures in the Roaring Twenties, in the 1930s also, but you could also modify it for other periods considering the versatility of white box. But don't go thinking that this is just a modified or tweaked version of white box that is of sword and sorcery or D&D type of play, so that it feels like a Lovecraftian RPG with many conventional elements. There are many things in this role-playing game that have been heavily modified so that it feels like an authentic Roaring 20s or even 1930s type of experience with the horror, the cosmic horror of the mythos. That is, there are some familiar elements so that anyone who is familiarized with the white box style of play can participate in any adventure while feeling that sense of familiarity. However, it's just a very vague sense. This is probably the closest thing that I've seen in old school Renaissance that manages to take the literature elements of Lovecraft's works and perhaps some things that we have seen in the classic Call of Cthulhu role-playing game and completely transform it into a white box monstrosity while creating characters that are completely adapted to the time and the place that is just as horrific, lethal, and insane as you would expect from a Lovecraftian experience. Before we go further into the review, I would like to thank one of my viewers, Joku, because he reminded me that I wanted to check out this game, and I'm glad that I did. So thanks, Joe. Now let's start talking about the quality of the PDF. When you purchase Eldritch Tales, you get your character sheet, of course, but you also have two files of the same rulebook. One is a low resolution file, and the other one is a high resolution file. This is quite useful because maybe you want to run the game directly from a computer that isn't too fast at loading things, or maybe you are running the game from a portable device that is also not too good at loading files. So this is a very nice detail. Now when it comes to the quality of the rulebook itself, the rulebook contains illustrations in black and white, but there are also some full color illustrations. I really like the edge of each page. It has this graphic with the upper part displaying some gold and yellow and sepia tones, while in the lower area you have this black and white and strange and alien looking graphics. I think this represents the contrast in Lovecraft's stories of rationalization and insanity. You can clearly see that contrast, and of course the contrast between our known material world and a world of cosmic horror, Eldritch secrets, and unfathomable mysteries. I think all the illustrations look great. They are appropriate for the theme and the setting. I also like the inclusion of maps, and when it comes to the writing, everything is well written and explained. This is a document that you will simply breeze through it. You will read many pages and you won't even notice how much you have read into the document. There is an excellent choice of words and economy of the way the concepts are communicated, the rules and the campaign setting, because here you have a lot of information of the vision that Lovecraft had of planet Earth. So there is nothing wasted as you read through the different pages. The document is also fully bookmarked and hyperlinked, so it's going to be very easy for you to make your way through the entire PDF. I only found a couple of errors by omission and a small issue concerning space. On the Great Race and Werewolf entries, their attack bonuses are missing. However, it's quite easy for you to determine the correct attack bonus by looking at the monster creation table later on in the book. And there should have been a space between the attack bonus and attack type of the nightgowns. But those are the only errors that I found on the entire book, so the quality is really good. Now let's talk about the contents. The book starts giving you an introduction. This is an excellent role-playing game for someone who has never played a role-playing game before, or an old-school Renaissance type of role-playing game, but also for someone who is not familiar with Lovecraft's works. This book does a great job when introducing you to any of those semiotic domains. It will teach you how to play role-playing games, and it will teach you everything about Lovecraft's setting and his vision, the version of real life or Earth that he used in his stories. Here it is referred to as Mythos Earth. So you have all sorts of details concerning the 1920s, the type of changes that society was going through, how there was some decadence but also many like a resurgence or renaissance and technological advancements, many exciting things related to science, technology, but also great social upheavals. So you have all the information needed to base your game in New England, but also in many other places. By the end of this book, you will see that you have information for many of the different areas that have been treated in Lovecraft stories or have been hinted at. So just to give you a small sample, you have a few paragraphs detailing Arkham with Miskatonic University, of course, Boston, Dunwich, Innsmouth, Kingsport, New York City, Providence, Salem. So you have information on fictional and real places according to the Lovecraftian mythos. Following that, you have a section detailing how to start playing the game. I think that one of the greatest strengths of this system is that it works great with just a game master and a player, emulating many of Lovecraft's stories of this main character that has been thrown in or thrust into a very hostile situation that at first it seems quite normal, very subtle, but it soon starts to escalate into horrors of alien and eldritch weirdness. And the reason as to why I think this is a great game to play with just one player character or even small parties is because not only have a class and occupation system that offers many skills and resources for the player characters, the system also encourages the creation of adventures that can be solved in multiple ways. Although many of those ways will be quite disturbing, quite creepy, but you still have the freedom of choice to use your character's abilities, proficiencies, and resources to the best of the ability of the character or as the situation demands it. Although this is just an observation of mine. You would normally play this game with a party of between 4 and 6 investigators, perhaps. So just because this is a white box style of system, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a Dungeons and Dragons type of situation where you have perhaps a haunted house or some catacombs or museums or any sort of Lovecraftian locale that could serve as an excuse for a mystery and an adventure. It doesn't mean that you're going to have like a character that is the fighter and the wizard and the rogue. Here you have some classes that could serve as parallels to those typical RPG classes, but only on the surface. And all of those classes are going to be in constant danger of the threats that they will face in Eldritch Tales. You have information on the dice that you're going to use. As I said, this is very beginner friendly. You have the well-known attributes such as strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. They work pretty self-explanatory. The more strength that you have, the heavier things that you will be able to carry, and the stronger that are going to be your hits in combat. And dexterity has to do with your coordination, reflexes. Constitution means your character's endurance, ability to withstand poison and disease, etc. So that's quite familiar for many of you when it comes to the white box mechanics. And then we have a table detailing the universal attribute modifier. That is, the higher your attribute, you could gain a +1 bonus, or if your attribute is very low, you're going to get a penalty. But you also have information on the feat of success. Depending on your attribute, you're going to get a range between 4 and 6. For those really high attributes, your feat of success is going to be between 4 and 6. That means that when you roll a d6 for all sorts of tests and checks, if you roll 4, 5, or 6, you're going to get a success. If you have an average attribute, you will need to roll 5 or 6. And when you have a really low attribute, you will only get a success by rolling a 6. And there are many things that modify these rolls, because it depends on what your character knows, the types of tools that you are using, the different obstacles and conditions of a particular situation. So there are many specific things that could give you a greater or lower chance to succeed at different checks. You also have information on how this affects experience, more details concerning these attribute feats that I was telling you about, because all of the skills and anything that your character learns is going to be tied to a particular attribute, but also depends on the situation. Sometimes some sort of proficiency or skill will be tied to strength, but other times coordination is more appropriate. For example, maybe you are doing something related to science and it requires just a theoretical and practical application of your knowledge and methods, it would be an intelligence feat of success. But what if it's something related with handling very dangerous chemicals? Then a dexterity-based check will be more appropriate. So in general terms, what you are knowledgeable in will give you a bonus all the time, but the range of the feat of success, that is what you need to roll, is always tied to a particular attribute. So in that case, maybe your knowledge in science gives you a +1, and when you need to figure out something related to science, you would normally only need to roll 4, 5, or 6. But because of your +1 in knowledge in science, now you only need to roll 3 or above. But maybe your dexterity is quite low, but thanks to your bonus in science, now you only need to roll 5 or 6 instead of 6. Now let's talk about the steps of character creation. You have a typical or standard method, but you also have the optional step of adding occupations. Let's talk about the basics first. You have the first step, determine basic attributes by rolling 3 6-sided dice and recording the totals on each attribute entry. Then you choose a character class, and we'll talk about that later on. Then you determine your equipment by rolling 3 6-sided dice and multiplying the total by 10. This is going to give you money that you will be able to spend to acquire different sorts of things, gear, weapons, if it fits your character concept, of course. You also have contacts. Depending on other things, you can choose from different types of contacts that will assist you in the different adventures, but also you will have to assist them if they require help. Then we have the optional step of occupation, and I will cover that in a few minutes. And then we have character relationships, where each player character randomly determines a relationship with another player character in the group, or if you are just playing with a single player character, you're going to have a relationship with a non-player character. Then you determine secondary abilities such as hit points and armor class. Languages, movement, and other combat details are also recorded. Now, when it comes to two particular things that make this game stand away from White Box and get it deeper into Lovecraftian territory, are the insanity and mythos lore attributes. Insanity is the damage that you're going to take. Your sanity is equal to your wisdom score, but as you take damage when you fail saving throws versus insanity, or perhaps related to other effects, you're going to get insanity points, and if they reach your wisdom, that is, if you have 13 wisdom and the insanity points reach for 13, you're going to end up insane, completely and incurable insane. There are other particular details, and we will cover those later on. And when it comes to mythos lore, you start out with a mythos lore of 0, but as you learn many secrets that were not meant to be known by man, this mythos lore will go up, and it could offer some knowledge-related advantages. Now let's talk about the different classes. We have the Antiquarian, a learned scholar and seeker of knowledge. The Antiquarian has a deep understanding of the sciences, ancient mysteries, and forgotten lore. So you have skills such as knowledge in history, literature, mythology, appraisal, and writing. So you're going to get bonuses, and this will increase as you go up in level, if you're lucky enough to survive. You can also learn many different languages. You are really good at research, at making saving throws against mind control and insanity. Your choice of weapons and armor is quite limited. You can only employ clubs and handguns, and you can only wear light armor. And you can actually get 2 academic contacts. Then we have the Combatant. Combatants are individuals trained in the martial ways. They may be soldiers, mercenaries, brawlers, bodyguards, boxers, martial artists, etc. So you are quite skilled at athletics, first aid, knowledge related to military matters, when driving something or survival. And you're also a combat machine. That is, you can attack several times per round when fighting against adversaries that are considerably weaker than you. You are also a great leader, giving an inspiration bonus against fear. You also get a good bonus when rolling your saving throws against fear and death. You have a good selection of weapons and armor. Basically, you can use any sort of weapons and protection. And you start out with a martial contact. Then we have the Opportunist. Whether streetwise scoundrels, globe-trotting treasure hunters, or gentlemen rogues, opportunists are individuals who have a sense of adventure, a desire for notoriety, and an incurable wanderlust. So you are skilled in appraisal, driving, perception, athletics, and sneak. You're also quite lucky. You can reroll one failed die roll per game. You are also very good at backstabbing. You have a bonus in your saving throw against traps, explosions, and stun. You have a nice selection of weapons. You can use clubs, knives, handguns, submachine guns, and similar things. And you can wear light or medium armor. You start out with 2 contacts of your choice. Then we have the socialite. Socialites are individuals who rely on their personalities, charisma, and speaking ability to accomplish their goals. A sneaky con artist, a fervent preacher, a military officer. You could be any of those and many other things. So you are skilled at deception, interaction, and knowledge related to etiquette. You're really good at performing, or maybe you have some sort of specialized knowledge in other things. You are also highly effective at influencing others. You have a bonus when making saving throws against mind control and deception. You have a decent selection of weapons and armor. Basically daggers, handguns, swords, but you can only wear light armor. You begin the game with 1 influential contact and 2 additional contacts. So as you can see of these character classes, they could be compared to Dungeons and Dragons type of classes. So for example, you could say that the combatant is kind of like the fighter of the group, and the opportunist is the rogue, but it goes beyond that. If you try to play this game with a standard medieval fantasy type of mindset, you're going to get killed or your character is going to end up insane. So it's all about using the different strengths and abilities of the different character classes. For example, the antiquarian is going to do great when analyzing different clues and occult mysteries, but don't expect the antiquarian to survive a fight against several cultists or ghouls. The combatant will be quite poor when handling or piecing together all sorts of clues and information, but he's going to be the best at protecting the group against ghouls and zombies and the like. The socialite is going to get you through many different difficult situations. The socialite will allow you to get some clues and open some doors, so to speak, thanks to his many connections in all sorts of walks of life. And when it comes to the opportunist, he feels a lot like a jack of all trades. And because this class has such an easy time getting into places and obtaining objects that other people do not want you to go into or obtaining, this is the class to use when laws and social conventions need to be bypassed. When it comes to character relationships, you make a roll to determine a relationship with the character to your right. So maybe you are an opportunist and you have someone playing the socialite to your right, and maybe you're actually in love with that character, or maybe that character owes you a debt, or maybe you're actually quite protective of that character. And likewise, maybe you have the combatant to your left. So now the combatant needs to roll on the table to see if maybe he has traveled with your character for several weeks, or maybe you're actually the mentor of the combatant, or maybe you have a family history with that character. There are many things that actually add a lot to the story, so that these player characters do not feel like just pieces, so that they feel like living, breathing people that are trying to survive the insanity and horrors of the mythos. Now, I would like to clarify more about the mythos lore. This score goes up as you read different forbidden tomes, or perhaps decipher some mysteries as you talk to different non-player characters, as you take a look at some strange drawings and engravings at very ancient and alien sites. So this score will go up and will actually give you a positive modifier every time you need to make a saving throw versus insanity, where mythos is the cause, or when you are making a spell check, because here you have the capacity to carry out rituals and spells. But this bonus also applies to any sort of role related to mythos knowledge, trying to see if your character knows something about a spell, a monster, an ancient site. And by the end of all of these character creation steps, you add some finishing touches. How old is your character? Where is your character from? What he or she does for a living, etc. Now let's talk a bit about contacts. Like I said near the beginning of this review, contacts are useful to call upon when you are hitting a dead end during your investigations, but they may also ask for help. So you could have contacts of an academic nature, they could be related to the criminal world, they could be influential, or they could be medical contacts. So the more contacts you have, the better. As you have different adventures and solve different mysteries, you will be able to obtain contacts through different stories. And this adds a lot to the solo playability, in my opinion. If you're using a combatant and you don't know much about anything that you encounter, maybe you have a contact in the academic world that you have helped in the past, now you can take all of the clues that you have gathered, that inscription that you have no idea what it means, and perhaps this professor that you know of, your friend or ally or whatever, will help you in deciphering that piece of information. And now you can go into the adventure trying to tackle those situations in which your combatant is good at, that is, fighting. Then you have a section detailing equipment, how to purchase it, equipment weight, because if you carry too many things, you're going to get encumbered and you will move quite slowly. That is, you won't be able to cover as much distance as you normally would when you're not carrying all of that stuff. There are many things that you can purchase here. You have, for example, a table detailing clothing, boots, fine outfits, shoes, winter clothing, but you also have animals, camels, dogs, horses. You also have a table with general gear, ammunition of different types, binoculars, backpacks, cigarettes, lanterns, lighters, lockpicks. You also have information on services and lodging, such as, for example, apartment rooms, hotel rooms, offices. You also have information on vehicles and transportation, how much different tickets cost when it comes to international and local airfare. You also have the price for different cars, bicycles, canoes, different boats and ships. You also have taxi fares. And then we have a table detailing melee weapons. You have all sorts of things such as axes, brass knuckles, hatchets, knives, swords. You also have missile weapons, of course, bows, crossbows, dynamite sticks, pistols, shotguns, submachine guns, and machine guns. Armor in this game is quite simple. You only have 3 kinds of armor. You have light armor, medium armor, and heavy armor. They offer more protection, but they are also quite heavy. So if you're using heavy armor, consider that your character will not be able to cover as much ground as other more lightly armored type of party members. When it comes to light armor, maybe you are using just a very thick jacket. When it comes to medium armor, maybe you are wearing a heavy leather jacket or winter clothes. And heavy armor, it could be a flak jacket or even a steel cuirass. The point is that you should be able to play any character that you want while still feeling protected because of the money that you have spent. So if you're playing as a combatant, maybe it doesn't mean that you're going to be walking around in medieval armor. Maybe it means that you're just really padded with many sorts of layers of clothing, or maybe you have some chainmail that you managed to sneak under your jacket. Then you have a chapter detailing the different skills that you can use, such as appraisal, art, athletics, deception, drive, first aid, medicine, all sorts of things. And then we have occupations. I highly recommend that you choose an occupation for your player character. That is, that if you are a referee or game master, that you add this step in character creation, because this is going to give you occupational specialties and a weekly income. Now, specialties or specializations work in the following way. When a character attempts an attribute feat that involves one of his occupational specialties, the player rolls 2 six-sided dice and may choose either result. So it works effectively like a mechanical advantage. And I think this is better handled randomly, that is, when you randomly determine your occupation. Otherwise, you could run into some min-maxing situations, and in the random way, the player character would be rewarded by a lucky roll. That is, maybe you have created an antiquarian character and you make your roll on the random occupations table, and now you're also a professor, so the antiquarian goes great with the professor occupation because you are highly specialized in research and knowledge. That is, you would get your passive bonus from the class, but now you also get to roll 2 six-sided dice in addition to that. And like I said a few minutes before, you have a table to determine your occupation randomly, so that's really nice. That's a lot of old school charm to the entire thing. And depending on your occupations, it could be that you are an athlete or a detective, a farmer, or a librarian, and each occupation has certain characteristics such as specialties, possessions, and weekly income. So for example, let's say that your character has the occupation of being an artist, the creative minds of the world. Artists include painters, sculptors, photographers, and any other person who makes a living from an artistic pursuit. Your specialties have to do with appraisal, art, interaction. Your possessions include art supplies and a pocket knife, and your weekly income would be $4 plus 3d6 of random money generated each week. But let's take a look at another profession. Maybe you are a farmer or a rancher. They work close to the land and have a great amount of knowledge about the natural world. They focus on growing crops, so you would specialize in driving automobiles and operating heavy machinery, first aid, handle animal, other field-related knowledge, and your possessions would be a double-barrel shotgun, a large flashlight, a pocket knife, and you have a weekly income of $4 plus 2d6. So all of the professions are quite different, and they add a lot to what your character can do and what you know. And the weekly income is also very useful because you're going to be wasting ammo, you're going to need different gear for all sorts of situations. And this is great because it allows for many interesting character concepts. What if you created an antiquarian that is also a detective? Maybe your cases took you through many different ceremonial sites. Maybe you investigated things related to paranormal or occult matters, you found some strange looking idols and such. Or what if your combatant is also a doctor? Maybe you were in the army and you acted as a paramedic during different missions. But what if your opportunist is also an entertainer? Maybe you are a stage magician and you are highly skilled at performing all sorts of spectacular tricks. And what if your socialite is also a musician? Maybe that's how you got your connections. Maybe you performed at different parties or galas or balls and you met all sorts of people in those places. So I highly recommend that you add occupations to the character creation process. Following that, you have a chapter detailing how to play the game. That is gaining experience and how to advance the passage of time, because usually a round is 1 minute. But maybe you want a game with a faster pace, so here they give you the option so that each round lasts 6 or 10 seconds. You also have information on the movement rate and how it is affected by encumbrance. You also have information on climbing, employing assistants. This also adds to the solo playability of the game. If you do not have a certain expertise concerning particular areas, you could hire someone so that he helps you in your investigations and missions, traveling with you into unknown and terrifying places. So you have all the fees that each of these assistants could charge. For example, maybe you want a bodyguard or a driver, an entertainer, or a research assistant. You also have some tips on how to handle investigations, how to use your contacts, how to search for clues. This is great for a beginning role player and also someone who is not familiar with the mythos of how the characters in Lovecraft stories proceed to try to unravel the mysteries of the mythos. You also have information on negotiation and diplomacy. And then we have combat. Combat is quite standard. You should first determine surprise to see if a group ambushed the other group. Then you determine initiative by making a roll. And when it comes to attacks, you have two options. You have the typical lower armor class is better, but if you like higher armor class being a better protection benchmark, you have a table detailing what you need to roll to hit your opponent. So you have information on melee attacks, ranged attacks, the range of different missile weapons, the rate of fire. Some weapons like, for example, machine guns could emit bursts or sprays, and if you're using a shotgun, you want to use both barrels sometimes. So you have all the information concerning firearms and different modes of shooting. Then you have information on spells, although more details on particular spells will be handled later on. And then we have information on how to hit invisible opponents, of the penalty that you incur when doing so, information on morale. Those enemies that are not mindless will probably flee from an impossible type of situation. You have information on damage and dying. If you are reduced to 0 hit point, you die. Healing is quite slow. You recover 1 hit point per day of uninterrupted rest. However, there are some optional rules later on to make things slightly more pulpy. And of course, doctor type of characters can speed up the rate of recovery. But this is somewhat handled by the referee. There is no hard rule. It depends on types of wounds, in my opinion. Following these paragraphs, you have a couple of optional rules that make the game even deadlier. You have damage threshold. The damage threshold is a fixed number, and if you take damage beyond that number, you need to make a saving throw against death, or you immediately reduce your hit points to 1 and you fall unconscious. And you also have exploding dice, that is, when you roll the maximum on any of your dice, you roll again and you add to the total damage. So this makes the game quite deadly. You also have the optional rule of first aid. That is, once per day, you can recover a small and random amount of hit points. Then we have more details on attribute damage. You have an optional rule that makes the game a bit less lethal. So for example, when your character drops to 0, he's only unconscious and would instead need to drop a number of hit points below 0 equal to his or her level before dying. However, at 0 hit points, you start to bleed out, so you need to stabilize somehow. You could also handle death in the following way. At 0 hit points, the character needs to make a saving throw versus death to avoid dying. You simply fall unconscious. So it's up to you. There are many things that you can use to modify the experience for a specific campaign. You also have information on light sources, that is the illumination range, and how much each light source lasts, maybe a few hours or maybe just a few minutes. You also have more details on saving throws, when to make saving throws related to crushing and entanglement hazards, explosions, disease, illusions, and such. You also have more details on insanity. As your character gains insanity points, he will also get temporary insanities. It also depends on the source of insanity. Some things are just too horrifying and mind-breaking that you gain an immediate insanity because you suffered too many points at once of insane damage. And if your insanity equals or exceeds your maximum insanity, you permanently lose a random amount of wisdom points and you become irrevocably insane. You become a non-player character. Perhaps, depending on the situation, the character could recover from permanent insanity after extended psychological treatment in an asylum, but of course you would be scarred because of your reduced wisdom score. And if your wisdom score ever reaches 0, you are lost forever in the maze of madness. So it's always a good idea for your character to spend a week or two in an asylum after the different investigations, or throughout a single investigation if time permits, and also get treated if one of the members of the party has the psychologist occupation. But there could also be other methods, more practical and occult, in regaining your sanity. Some of the negative effects that you can obtain from these insanities are blindness, confusion, hallucinations, hysteria, limb paralysis, and of the permanent insanities that you can develop, you could get an alternate identity, you could have amnesia, anxiety, mania, night terrors, all sorts of phobias, and of course all of this will affect your character negatively as he tries to make checks, carry out different actions. And it's also recommended that you roleplay your insanity for additional believability. Then we have a section detailing how to run the game. This is perfect for the beginning game master and referee, but also if you want to refresh some concepts, even if you are a veteran referee. Here you have information on how Eldritch Tales is a game of skill, planning, and mental power. You won't be able to punch your way through the entire thing. Many, if not most, of the beasts and creatures encountered in Eldritch Tales will be more than a match for the player characters. In fact, you won't find stats for the different Elder Gods. They are just too powerful. If you are ever in the presence of Nyarlathotep or Cthulhu or Azathoth, you will probably die from insanity, or if you are lucky, you would just take a heavy amount of insanity damage and escape from there as fast as possible. That is if the Elder God does not eat you or something. So here you have information how to award experience points and other types of awards like new contacts, mythos lore points, wealth. You also have tips on how to design scenarios, creating problems, adversaries, determining the goal, handling the pacing of the game, how the player characters could get involved. You also have information and details on how to create an entire Lovecraftian campaign, how to produce the Lovecraftian ambience, how the campaign features average people that try to fight against cosmic horrors. You also have information on dreams, ancestry, and family lineage, as many of you know, recurring themes in the Lovecraft stories. And you also have optional rules for pulp adventures. Maybe you want to have characters that are more on the Indiana Jones vein of things. So here you have some pulp rules that give the player characters attribute boosts. You can increase modifiers gained from these attributes. They increase with each level. You also have more hit points. You could also increase the maximum insanity so that the characters can interact with many horrors without becoming completely insane. And you can also give the player characters easier methods to heal insanity. Then we have a chapter detailing magic. Magic in Eldritch Tales is quite interesting because you do have some spells that are completely Lovecraftian, but some others feel like Dungeons and Dragons type of spells that have been tweaked or modified so that they fit the mythos. So here you have information on how spells are quite dangerous. You could make your spell check. It's basically rolling a 6-sided die and adding the relevant modifiers. And if you are successful, the effect that you want happens. But if not, something really bad usually happens to your caster. So here you have spell descriptions. That is by level, how to learn a spell, the casting time, the spell fit, that is what you need to roll to cast that spell. You also have information on range, duration, and the failure associated with that spell. All of the character classes can cast spells in this game. However, some will have an easier time learning those spells because as you go through different ancient and eldritch tomes, they will give you a penalty when you try to decipher their mysteries. Now let me give you an example of how a spell works in Eldritch Tales. You have Alter Time. At first glance, this looks like a typical haste spell, affecting an area where as many as 24 creatures can move and attack at double the normal speed. But you could also cast it as Slow Time, so that as many as 24 creatures can only move and attack at half speed. However, if you fail when casting this spell, the caster's mind slips into a time stream, catching glimpses of different eras, and the character falls unconscious for a number of rounds. When the character wakes up, he gains insanity points, and he may actually be scented by the Hounds of Tindalos. And as many of you know, when the Hounds of Tindalos detect you, they will chase you through space and time. So those are the type of negative effects or miscast effects that you can get when using these different spells and rituals. So for example, maybe you want to animate a zombie of sorts. You could get a zombie slave or servitor, but it could also be a zombie that starts attacking you with no rest if you fail that check. So you have spells such as Animate Carrion, Banish, Black Tentacles, Bodily Alteration, Condense Essential Salts, Control Weather, Corpse Marionette, Detect Magic, Dominate, Elder Sign, Elixir of Immortality, Hypnotism, Induce Dream Quest, Mind Transference, Project Image, Revivify from Essential Salts, Rot, Summon Deep Ones, Walk Among Angles, Ward, Boorish Sign. So many of you have probably identified that those spells are either related to a Lovecraft story, but also you have some classic Dungeons and Dragons spells like Cloud Kill, but that they have been modified for this game so that they have dangers, and even those effects that you would expect also have a Lovecraftian aesthetic or additional effects to them. Then we have a chapter detailing adversaries, beasts, and monsters. You have some normal things, such as apes, but you also have some eldritch and alien creatures, such as for example the Gogs. So you have information on their armor class, their hit dice, their attacks, the insanity that they cause. Not all of the enemies cause insanity, but many of them do. You also have information on saving throw, movement rate, the experience points that they give when you defeat them, etc. So you have apes and bears, cave beasts, the color out of space, of course, and this is a perfect example on how abstract battles can become. The color out of space is more like a hazard that you have to survive. There could be some ways to damage it, but it feels more like an environmental type of entity. You have the cosmic spawn of Cthulhu, you have deep ones, you have normal dogs, you have elder things, you have ghasts, you have ghosts, ghouls, all sorts of creatures, all of them recognizable in the Mythos lore, many of them that exist in real life in the case of normal animals, and some of them are more on the side of classic horror. So this adds a lot of versatility to the type of adventures and mysteries that you want to create. And at the end of this section, you have a table so that you can create any sort of creature that you want. When it comes to abilities, spells, and powers, it's all up to you. You have the information to create any sort of effect that you wish, but you also have more hard data related stuff, such as information on hit dice, the saving throws, and experience awarded per level. Now, just to further clarify the details of experience awards in this game, it's more about solving mysteries, reaching goals. You will get experience points for defeating any of those enemies, but this is something that I like about this game. It feels that there is a strong focus on surviving the ordeal, of unraveling the mystery, and thwarting the threat of the mythos, indirectly if necessary. Then you have a section detailing Eldritch artifacts. And of course you're going to have Mythos tomes with all sorts of lore and spells, such as the Book of Zian, the Book of Ivan, Cults de Ghoul, the Vermis Mysteris. You have the King in Yellow, the Necronomicon, and the Unausprechlichen Kulten. You also have all sorts of weird science artifacts and compounds, such as the Biotech Armor from the Migo, the Brain Cylinder, the Drug of Liao, the Molecular Destabilizer, Red Lotus Poison. You also have sorcerous items such as the Amulet of the Ghoul Cult, the Cthulhu Idol, the Cthulhu Mask, the Dark Lantern, the Serpent Ring, the Shining Trapezohedron. There is even the Staff of Solomon, which is more on the Solomon Kane side of things. Then we have the Mythos Secrets chapter. To avoid spoilers, I'm just going to mention the different places and factions that you can find in an adventure, because maybe the referee doesn't want his players to be aware of the different secrets and mysteries of all of these places. So you have information on Antarctica, Atlantis, Averon, Carcosa, the Dreamlands, Hyperborea, and all of these sites have secrets, have creatures, all sorts of passages into other worlds, all sorts of flora and fauna, so you could see them as adventure seeds as well. Then you have information on hidden cults, such as the Chesun Cook Coven. You also have the Church of Starry Wisdom, the Cthulhu Cult, the Esoteric Order of Dagon, the Keepers of the Yellow Sign, the Yithian Cult. You also have information on the Great Old Ones and other gods, such as Atlach Nakha, Azathoth, Cthulhu, Dagon, Nyarlathotep, Shub-Niggurath. They are all here. And near the end of the book, you have a complete starting adventure, the Tupilak, an Eldritch Tale scenario. I'm going to avoid spoilers once again, because I want the players to be surprised when the referee runs this adventure for them. This adventure is a great example of how you can have an old school Renaissance type of experience that doesn't depend on combat and disarming traps and such. Here, the investigation capabilities of the characters, their combat, their willingness to go to different areas within a city, to talk with different non-player characters, investigate sites, it all works out perfectly here. I really like the pacing of this adventure. Perhaps if I were to note a negative in this adventure is that I feel that it's a bit light on the mythos horror. There are a couple of moments where the characters could get that sense of eldritch dread, of cosmic horror, that they are trapped in a situation that is beyond their capabilities and their knowledge as simple mortals. But maybe this was intentional, this being a starting or introductory adventure so that the player characters do not feel too overwhelmed. However, make no mistake that you can get a total party kill if you are not careful. But of course, there's also the possibility of suffering insanity damage, and you could also end up with some long-term consequences for the rest of the character's career. At the end of the book, you have a couple of very useful appendices. You have Appendix 1, which is Eras of Mythos Earth. This contains all sorts of tips and advice so that you can customize your campaign. Perhaps you want to run a game in the 13th century, but maybe you want to run a game in modern times. Here you have all of the information and advice on how to handle that, how to modify gear and technology level. I think it's going to be useful if you obtain or you already possess some other white box type of games. Perhaps white box fantastic medieval adventure game if you want to run things in the past. But if you want to run things in the future or in modern times, maybe using white lies. If you want to run things during World War II, perhaps using Operation White Box, it could be a good idea. Or you want to run a sci-fi campaign, Maybe you could combine some things in Eldritch Tales with White Star. And Appendix 2 contains all sorts of inspirational material, such as authors and books and websites to further explore, so that you can create Lovecraftian characters, adventures, and campaigns. So what do I think of Eldritch Tales? Well, I think this game is excellent. I was quite surprised. When I first took a look at it, I thought, well, maybe this is a good game, that it's going to be like your typical white box affair with some tweaks so that it feels Lovecraftian, but no. Because of the character customization options, the way sanity is handled, and the terrifying and powerful beasts that are encountered in the bestiary and that you can create to challenge your players, this goes beyond that. This is not your typical dungeon crawl type of situation. This is about characters using an old school Renaissance type of system to solve a puzzle that will otherwise result in death and complete insanity. I think that the standard lethality or grittiness of White Box fits in perfectly with the mythos. I also really like it that because of the game style and the occupations that add a lot of specializations to the table, to the already existing skills that you obtain with a character class, this is really a great game for just one or two investigators. Or even if you are using like a solo system, perhaps using the Game Master emulator, or a heavily tweaked version of Schweig's themed dungeon generator, you could perhaps play this game as a solo experience or as a cooperative experience. If you ever encounter a situation that is not covered by any of your skills or proficiencies, you could look for help. This is a believable world. You could ask for professional participation from someone else, from a specialist, or even hire the needed help. But not being completely equipped for the situation at hand is also quite Lovecraftian. Many of Lovecraft's characters lack all sorts of skills related to knowledge and physical prowess, and they just try to get by. Many of them die, of course, and a lot of them become insane, but that's also part of the fun. So if you're looking for a simple system with enough depth so that you can feel that you are actually playing in one of Lovecraft's stories, I highly recommend Eldritch Tales. And if you already love White Box and you like Lovecraft's stories, there is no question about it. You should definitely get Eldritch Tales. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.